Live from Boston Broadcasting in the What a Day studios, this is the What a Day podcast with your host, Joe Lowry. Hey everybody, Joe Lowry, What a Day. Welcome to the What a Day podcast, and I'm very pleased to introduce my guest for the show. She is the vixen of valets. She is the perfect 10, Nickla Baby Doll Roberts. Welcome to the show, Baby Doll.
Hey, Joe. What a day.
Awesome. It's great to have you. Now, before we get started, I have to know, who came up with the name Baby Doll?
I believe it was between Dusty and Tully. It actually was Tully's favorite strip club in San Antonio.
Really?
But
Okay.
Tully, a lot of the guys had called me Baby Doll since I was like 13, 14, because my dad had the wrestling promotion in Lubbock.
Yeah.
And they called me Baby Doll because Nickla is kind of hard to say and understand. So Baby Doll kind of was one of those names.
Oh, I
Kind
hear
of
you.
a southern thing.
So you grew up in the business pretty much then. Your mom and dad were promoters, I do believe.
Well,
they ran a wrestling outfit, or?
Both of my mom and dad were both wrestlers, especially during the 50s.
Yeah.
And then they got a chance to buy in a promotion in Lubbock, Texas. They bought it from Sled Allen. And they started promoting in 1962, right after I was born. And my dad promoted until for over 20 years. I'm not quite sure exactly how long, but well more than 20 years out of Lubbock.
Wow. I mean, it's funny because now I grew up in the Northeast, Boston. So I was always regulated to WWF programming growing up. I became a fan in the summer of 81, actually. And cable was just coming around about a year later or so. And what I love, my Saturdays changed forever, obviously. Really quick, if it wasn't for a friend of mine's paper route who I was covering for, I would never have found professional wrestling, because when I was delivering the paper one day, an older lady had it on in the background, and I asked her what that noise was, and she said, "It's Saturday morning wrestling." And I ran right home, and I was hooked ever since. My Saturdays changed forever. So with that being said, for some reason or another, I don't know what it was, we had a local station that we got world-class championship wrestling beamed in to the cable to my home. And lo and behold, I fell in love with the Von Erichs, Gino Hernandez, and there you were, right there. I was like, oh my God, there's women involved in this? Because I was relatively new, so I had no idea. I knew there were lady wrestlers, but I didn't know there were like valets or spokeswomen, as you could say. But then I remember you being introduced as Andrea the Giant, and that was a tribute to Andre the Giant?
Well, they were trying to make it seem like I was big, badass, like this really tall, ominous, or just this. I don't know how to describe it, because I didn't like it. I mean, even Gino called me Nickla in promos, and the announcer did, because to me it was almost a diss on Andre, because there was no other Andre, and especially to call a female Andrea, we didn't like it.
Now, did you meet Andre the Giant at all, or?
Yes, he wrestled for my dad several times. We got him, I believe, like twice a year, was part of the NWA deal.
Yeah.
We got the world champion twice a year, and we got Andre twice a year. And whenever I was old enough to drive, I actually drove him to Odessa and back, and to Abilene and back. And we talked on one of the trips, because I'd gone to Germany with a boyfriend, and I'd had some buffalo grass vodka, and it was like so good. And we were talking about Germany and everything. And about 3 months after I'd seen Andre, I actually got a box in the mail at my house. And it was from Frenchie from North Carolina. And my parents were like, "Who do you know in North Carolina?" And shoot, I didn't know. But whenever I opened it up, it was from Andre. Andre had sent me 4 bottles of the buffalo grass vodka. He had Frenchie send it to me.
Unbelievable.
So
That's awesome.
Andre was just the nicest person ever. Just super nice guy.
When I became a fan, and one of my first matches with him was versus Killer Khan in the stretcher matches up and down the Northeast. And I had like a ringside seat at the Boston Garden. And when he came out, I was like 11 or 12 at the time. He scared that, but he was out of me. He was a big, big man. And and then I read the history on him and so forth, and God love him. He was like such a saint. Everyone said I can't find a bad story about him, and I mean, it's great. I'd love to hear those stories. But
super guy.
Now, when I saw you in the ring with Gino Hernandez, and you look like that combination of like leather Tuscadero meets Joan Jett. It was like that 80s. I mean, that was huge. And I would, I was very much excited because I'm like, oh my God, this is great. How well
Right.
did you knew Gino for how long? How long were you guys acquainted
Oh,
for?
I'd known Gino since I was maybe 14, 15. He had
Right.
wrestled for my dad. He started wrestling in like the upper like in the Southwest Territories and San Antonio and Dallas and through there. He actually trained with Jose Lothario
Yep.
was one of his
Yep.
trainers. So I'd known Gino when I was like 14, 15 probably.
Was it really a crush like they say on the tabloids?
Oh, huge crush. Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
You know,
awful. It was
my
awful.
my fiance got involved with wrestling because of me, obviously. But we saw that. I don't know if you watched that Dark Side of the Ring show. They had a special
Yes.
on Gino, and she couldn't. She was like, that man was beautiful. He was very, very good looking. I'm like, oh, you think so? Okay. So I mean, yeah, he was.
Well, and especially like I'm 15 and he was like 20, of course, that was, yeah.
Yeah, May
He was
December right there, right?
he was dreamy. Else could I say? He was dreamy.
Did you guys keep in contact when you went off to the
Never never
NWA?
spoke to him. No.
No,
After
that's
I left in Dallas, the last time I saw him was right before I went to Florida because I had two more shows for
yeah.
World Class in Florida on Christmas Day and the day after. And I guess that the last time I worked with him might have been the second week of December, and I never spoke to him because you just get busy, and it's not
Yes,
like
yes.
we just called and talked to each other. So
All right.
he had other things going on and a girlfriend, and I
Yeah.
was the last person he'd want to talk to, I think. Well,
So
it was good because I mean, Gino could have really taken advantage of the situation, especially since I felt the way I did about him, but he
yeah,
didn't. And I have a lot of respect for him for that because he treated me with nothing but respect. And I don't have anything bad about him. I couldn't say anything bad about him.
yeah. I mean, I didn't know him personally. I thought he was a hell of a performer. I loved him in the ring.
Right,
Um, Watching WWF, obviously switching over to world class, totally, too black and white when it comes to competing.
right.
I
And see,
spoke to
world class at the time, like whenever you were getting world class was in more markets than
yeah,
any other wrestling promotions combined. They were the first one to actually go worldwide.
yeah, they were good. I mean, everyone's like, Joe, what are you watching? And I'm like, they're from Texas. I don't know what's going on here. And it was like, for me, the only way I can get them without having to watch on TV was, of course, the wrestling magazines, which we all loved. I grew up buying them and so forth. My Tuesday afternoons changed forever. The second Tuesday of every month because I bought every magazine there was.
Right.
Bill Apter, who's a good friend of mine, I know you know Bill as well. He tells me the stories all the time, and that's when I first saw you again was in the magazines. Where they did whether it was a story on the Von Erichs or whatever, Gino Hernandez, and there you were, and I'm like, oh my God, you went from TV to print, and it was like, oh my God, this is great. Now it was my internet back then when you think about it, because you
Oh
didn't know
yeah.
what was going on. Nobody had the cable like they do nowadays. But then again, we can fast forward a little bit here. You moved over to the Jim Crockett side of the NWA, and there you were on my TV set at 6:05 to 8:05 every Saturday night, and you were aligned with Tully Blanchard and so forth. How did that come about? You going from world class over to Jim Crockett? Did they recruit you? Did you want to go over there? How did that end up?
Oh yeah. I had like what I'd said, I had 2 days of two more dates with world class and then I was done. And I
Right.
didn't really want to go back to school. I didn't want to go back to Lubbock. I really liked working in wrestling. So whenever I landed in Florida, I knew that Michael Hayes was a booker, and I knew Michael Hayes from like working with World Class and
Yeah.
with my dad. So whenever I landed, I actually drove to a liquor store and bought like this ridiculously huge bottle of Jack Daniels. Went to the show, saw Michael Hayes, handed him the bottle of Jack Daniels, and gave him the spiel like, "Well, I'm looking for a place to go. Could you use me? I really want to stay, working and booking and, be booked." And he told me that they were actually getting ready to shut down Florida, that to go to the next dressing room and talk to Dusty, that Dusty was quote unquote getting ready to blow up the Carolinas. He said they're getting ready to do some really big things over there. They've
Right.
got a bunch of new talent coming in. And that, did I know Dusty? And I was like, yeah, I know Dusty because I knew Dusty from working with my dad. And then whenever I walked in the dressing room, there was Tully was standing right next to Dusty. Dusty was in the chair, and then Tully standing right next to him. And I gave him the spiel about, I was looking for a place to go, and you could just kind of see in their face of like, this may work.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that they were actually looking for a girl for Tully at the time. They'd had the 10 contest. They'd been asking for VHS tapes and pictures and the whole thing. And they actually were looking for Sunshine. So me being right there at the right time, I just completely changed their minds, and they did a complete 180, and they could see me working because, to call me a 10, I mean, I'm not, and everybody kind of knows it, but it was perfect to get the heat because, well, why does she think she's a 10? She's not a 10. Well, yes, I am. And, it worked out perfect. And Tully and our chemistry worked out really well. Dusty and I worked out really well together. And I didn't mind getting heat. I didn't mind people hating me. I actually really loved being a heel. I don't see like the girls today being able to take the heat that I did, because there was a lot of physical to it, because people actually would beat you up going to the ring and back from the ring and getting stuff thrown on you and spit on you. And
why was that? You guys had no barricades going to and from there, even in world class. I noticed that. Like,
well, we had a rope. There was a rope around the ring.
It's like, oh my goodness! I look at it. I mean, I remember watching Tully and Magnum TA and everybody coming through. They would have to push people out of the way, and we couldn't get that up here because WWF was just, everything was sectioned off. You were in arenas and all that. You could never get near them, and that was the attraction for me of watching championship wrestling down in Georgia, NWA stuff, is you guys really were interacting with the fans, even the studio audience.
Some of their shows had like a small metal barricade around the ring, but it wasn't much. I mean, you could easily hop over it, and a lot of times people did, but that was the difference of it. We actually had the audience was part of the show. I mean, you were actually part of it, and that's what is so sad now, is because they don't have any shows with any crowds, and that would be rough to do that. That would you're just doing a gymnastics routine, I think, at this point.
Yeah, we can touch on the pandemic later, but it's very painful to watch right now without a crowd, because it's definitely a two-way street, this industry. The crowd, the wrestlers, and vice versa, and so forth. But so here we are. We're in the NWA. I'm sure you've been asked this a million times. The big slap with Tully Blanchard. Now, forget. I'm trying to backtrack here. Did Dusty slap you first earlier on? He did, right? And
whenever I very first started, and because I was all up in his face and very confrontational, and at the time he was scared to do it because hitting a woman was just taboo.
You couldn't even do that.
At the time, he was afraid to do it because he thought it would switch him heel. But I had so much heat, and people hated me so bad. If you watch him, whenever he slaps me, even the women in the audience, you can see they're wanting Dusty just to knock the crap out of me again. And that's some serious heat whenever, because nobody went, he hit her. It was like, no, get her.
You don't see that anymore, and I miss that. That interact. That's the real storylines like that. But to me, I thought the Dusty angle was pretty cool. But I mean, here you are, NWA, Tully Blanchard. Who created that storyline? I know they wanted to turn you face, I do believe. And was it his idea, your idea, Jim Crockett's idea? Like, who did you all come up with it?
Well, it was kind of a weird set of circumstances, because at the time, I mean, with Tully and I, we'd been together for like a year, so we'd kind of done everything. And from what I remember, and this may not be correct, but this is what my memory of it was, that they were going to put me with Landell, and Landell was going to beat Flair for the title, and then Landell and I were going to have a run with the world's title for a while.
Wow!
But then Landell, through his demons, didn't show up for like 2 weeks, and they fired him. So then it was just like, well, what are we going to do with Doll? We've got to do something with her. She's got all this heat. Well, you take the top heel, and that's who you turn babyface. So then they had me go with Dusty through the slap with Tully, and then they we're going to put JJ with Tully because that would make sense because JJ had been with Landell. So just put JJ with Tully and then me with Dusty, and everything just made sense. I mean, Dusty was such a genius with just making everything work. And like what I said, we worked out so well together because I gave him a lot to work with. Not only was I like a really good heel and I didn't mind getting heat, I was also like the perfect baby face, you know, because I was so amicable and personable with the fans and everybody. You know, I wasn't perfect, and I was like the everyday girl that was now like everybody's girl, and it just worked out really. It was cool. It was just really neat.
Dusty, you know, looking back on it now, his ring psyche and the way he could, you know, not manipulate, but do the fans, you know, to play that's hard to do even nowadays. But, you know, everything was new back then. When you think about it, I mean, I'm sure the storylines have been played over and over like I've seen nowadays. But I mean, for that to happen and so forth, did you like being involved like that?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that it was so perfect for me because I loved wrestling. And it was like when you were saying, like with the cable TV coming out, whenever Lubbock had cable come out, it was like sections would be turned on. Like every month, like a new grid would be turned on. So every month I was calling Cox Cable as like, do I get cable yet? Do I get cable yet? Waiting because I wanted to see the 605 Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I loved it. It was something new. I had the respect of the boys. I liked being like with the wrestlers and being like the only girl. And it was just a very unique and just a really special time in my life.
Yeah, you didn't see that very often back then. Valet is getting involved like that. I mean, back then, my memory of the valet was just escorting to and from the ring. And there was no other, you know, I'll take your gown or robe or whatever, and I'll take it back to the, you know, to the locker room. I think you changed that. I mean, you had your Precious and your Sunshines and so forth like that, but you took it to the next level. I mean, I thought
you have like the little bitty girls like Sunshine and Precious were very small females. You actually had a female that was, you know, like I'm 5'10" and probably 190 to 210 at the time. You know, I'm a big girl. I'm real athletic. And then I have a look like, I can be pretty, but then I'm also like really tough. So it just, I was perfect for it. It worked out. Like no one had that spot that I did.
That's the perfect 10 right there. No, it worked. I mean, because I was attracted to it because I'd never seen it before. And at the time, I think the WWF had Elizabeth, but there was nothing physical going on there. I don't think she got physical until later in the 80s, late 80s, when all of it was.
And she really didn't do that much. She just clapped and smiled. She was like the typical valet and took the robes and things like that. And hers was like all the selling was in the ring. I think the most physical thing she did in the ring, like when that was like she took her skirt off, you know, for the thing, and everybody was like, ah.
No, you say, you know, my daughter's 5'10", so I know that's tall for a girl because she played volleyball and basketball and so forth. So you don't see that obviously nowadays. I mean, some of the superstars that are in the ring now, you know, they don't even clear the third rope. It's like, really, like, geez. So just real quick, what are your thoughts on today's action? Do you watch wrestling at all anymore? Do you keep up with it?
Every chance I get. I'm pretty busy right now. We've got custody of my husband's grandson. He's 5. So at 58 years old, I never thought I'd be a mom again, but I'm a mom. And so, and that's really cool. I mean, it's because I had 2 daughters before, and now I've got a little boy. And we have a small farm. I've got, I think, like 37 chickens and a couple of turkeys. And we've got the and I give eggs away to all my neighbors. I've got some elderly neighbors and then my daughters and I give out eggs to everybody. And I've got a huge garden, and I try and keep up with it as much as I can. And because I just love it. But now with the pandemic thing and the guys just being, you know, with no audience, it's really, it's difficult to watch. And I promise I really try, but it's rough.
Now, what do you watch?
I know that they want to try and keep the product going and keep the storylines going, but
it's tough. It's very tough. Do you watch WWE? Do you watch AEW? Would you or do you watch both? I mean,
I watch whatever's on. If it's on, like whenever I'm like scrolling through channels, I will definitely, no matter what else is on, I'll be watching. I like AEW right now because Jake's in there and they're giving Jake like a really big push, and then Tully and Arn and all them. I think I'm going more. I try and make time to go watch her product a little more than anything else because of I know the guys that are working.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Obviously, growing up WWE and all that stuff, and their products, they're so big now, and it's so manufactured. There's no authenticity to it anymore. To me, anyways. And when AEW came along, and I found out last year Cody Rhodes and all those guys were involved, and they didn't care about ratings, they didn't care about anything. Same with Chris Jericho, they didn't care about any of that stuff. And they came out and they just put on a hell of a show, even with the crowds. It made me fall in love with wrestling again, because that's the wrestling I grew up with. Now, and I've said it before, the storylines are more outside the ring now than they are inside the ring. But with AEW, it's more inside the ring now, and that is something that's missing in this generation. Everything's a video game, so they want these dream matchups and so forth. And it is painful to watch with no crowd. Even with the crowd that they do now with the masks on and everything, it's and it's tough. It's very, very tough. It's definitely a two-way street. So
we were all like, whenever I was training and working and stuff, like the crowd is like what's happening in the ring is maybe 10% of it, but then 90% of it is a crowd, because if you don't have the crowd and they're just sitting on their hands, you've got to get them involved in it. And if you don't have the crowd, then who are you working for?
It's tough.
You're just flopping around, I guess.
Now, has AEW or anybody reached out to you to make an appearance at all, or come back as Baby Doll?
No, I do. I do quite a few of the podcasts, and then I do a lot of the Legends and Fan Fest and things like that. But no. And I'm good with I'm good with that. I've got like with what I said with a 5-year-old. I mean, I've got other responsibilities.
I know. I've been down that road 3 times.
I'm kind of thankful that they're not, because it's kind of like it would be tough, because I think that they know that my answer would be no, because that's one of the reasons why I got out back in the 90s was I had gotten pregnant, and I had my daughter in January 1st of 91, and I didn't work until maybe 2002, because I mean, you're either wrestling or you have your kids, and I didn't want to make a choice between the two.
Right. No, I don't blame you. I mean, it's tough. I had Francine on last week, and she said the same thing. She does conventions now and then, and she can't go periods of days without the kids. And it's, I understand that. It's tough. Everything changes. I mean, it's definitely a lifestyle. You know that. Tell me some trips overseas. Did you you were over in Japan for some time, weren't you not?
No, and I went to Canada once for wrestling. I went to Germany before I was in wrestling. I went to Germany for 2 weeks. I think we went to Juarez twice when we were wrestling, because we were in El Paso. But no, my mom worked a lot overseas, because she went to Australia a couple of times and went to Mexico and wrestled there. I'm trying to think. I went to Toronto once, but no, everything was like in the States, especially in the Southeast.
Right. And you trained with, who did you train with for wrestling?
Whenever I'd gotten out of wrestling and had married Sam, and then they had quit booking me there for a summer, I went to Nelson Royal's camp and worked out with Nelson Royal in Mooresville. And Robin and I worked out there for a couple of months, and we stayed with Nelson and his daughter Shannon and Robert, and his wife were just they were just the nicest people. And we trained, and then Robin had a tryout with WWF, and then I had a tryout, but I didn't know it was a tryout, but she got it and I didn't. And for me, it was perfect, because she fit the role, and then that way everybody in the whole family was wrestling or working at the time. So and she was perfect with it. She had some really, really good matches with Sherry. Yeah,
I saw you. Now you know Sherry Martel, obviously, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, to me, I think she was right up there. I mean, taking the bumps and everything like that. But she's a former wrestler. She wrestled full time, and then she switched over to the valet. But she always took a bump, and that was.
100%. Sherry was just so good at everything she did, just really, really, and just the nicest girl, and just always liked being around her, and just Sherry was one of those people that when I saw that she was going to be on a card, I was happy because I'd really like to see her.
Did you outside of the valet with Tully and all that, when you were at Jim Crockett, you guys did house shows? Did you ever wrestle during the house shows? Were you ever involved in like a tag team match or a singles match?
Well, I did the summer with Jim Cornette where we
Yeah.
had the 6-man tags and things like that, but I never worked against a girl. I did the deal with Cornette after he hit me in the stomach with a tennis racket, and I took a little time off and then came back, and we did the 6-man tags, and then the tags, either it was like Dusty and Magnum or the Road Warriors or Rock and Roll Express. We did a couple of months with that and did really, really well. Did real well with that.
How were those tag teams back then? Those guys were on fire. I mean, the
I know,
crowds.
it's so cool. And it's so cool to watch like the YouTube videos and
Yeah.
just hear the crowd reaction. And I feel sorry for the guys now because they've got so much pyro and the music and the whole shebang that they actually don't feel the
Yeah.
crowd anymore.
Yeah. I hear you.
It's really cool walking out in front of like 12 to 20,000 people and just feeling all that energy, whether they love you or they hate you. It's amazing. It was just so cool.
To me, the pyrotechnics and all that, trying to jumpstart the audience, which I don't, coming from that generation, the only way to jumpstart me is to put on a great show and, get some heat and some all good stuff going on. A real quick story when you talk about that. Of course, I saw Hulk Hogan when I was younger, and I went home, my ears were ringing and all that stuff. And then fast forward, like 15 years later, I took my son, who was like, I don't know, 10 at the time, and him and it was the night they were taping SmackDown where Hulk Hogan and Edge won the tag titles. And as we were leaving the arena going home, my son looked at me and goes, "Dad, my ears are ringing." And I said, that's how it was for me every time I went to these things, because I've been versus Raws and SmackDowns and pay-per-views and all that, and I'd leave there and the crowd just mulling out. I used to leave there as a kid like, oh my God, did you see what happened and this and that? And it's so different now. Obviously, the generation that you were in and that genre was just unbelievable for me, which made me the fan I am today. I mean, it's
right.
And don't mean to.
Fans are so cynical now. Everything is so much the internet, and everybody's, instead of like the promoter doing what he wants to do, there's too much trying to make the fans happy, and you'll never make the fans happy. You got to do what you have to do to make them almost mad, to where they're so mad they want to pay the money to come back. But now they're trying to please them so much that it's gotten really wishy-washy and kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I think the internet and social media has kind of put a damper on the sport. I mean, I remember I was in the Navy back in '88, and I remember going through the Norfolk airport, and I saw this crowd of people surrounding these huge, gigantic men with white hair, and it was the Freebirds, and they were walking through the airport in character, and I was like, oh my God, they're in character. This is great. Now, you see somebody like Seth Rollins or Finn Balor walking down the street, it's like just another guy. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media and all that. Kayfabe obviously is not a big deal anymore. That to me spoils it, because I like that stuff. I mean, you hear the stories back in the day. If you're doing a run with somebody, you weren't seen together. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you probably didn't stay at the same hotel together, because if you were, oh my God, word got out and people would go crazy.
Right.
I miss that. That's the stuff that I miss.
Right. You couldn't go in the convenience store at the same time. Like if we pulled up and Dusty was in the convenience store, we had to like back out and wait until he left, and then we could go in. And now guys, they have their matches and they're taking selfies with each other after the good battle, brother. Good battle.
Yeah, it's like, it's tough. It's definitely a different generation now. That is for sure.
And I don't think anyone wants to be a heel now, because it would hurt their merchandise sales.
Yeah.
No one wants to be that character. No one wants to be disliked. Everybody wants to be liked and sell all their merchandise and be happy. And I think maybe Tessa and Charlotte might be the only two that don't care whether they're heels or not.
Yeah. What do you think of Charlotte? Do you like her?
Oh, love her. Love the character. Love how they're doing the shoot from her dad, and she's got the look, and she's so athletic. She actually went to school in App State, which is like right up the road from me, and up in Boone,
Right.
probably 45 minutes from where I'm at. She had like a volleyball scholarship, and
Yep.
between her and Tessa, I mean, she's really good. Now, I don't want this because my daughter also wrestles, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
she's quite a warrior also.
Yeah, I mean, I like Charlotte. Charlotte kind of reminds me of my daughter, tall, blonde, three-sport athlete, volleyball, basketball. So,
Right.
but I mean, I know everyone, I hear everybody like, oh, she's using this Flair name and all that stuff. I go, but she can wrestle. She can
Yes.
actually wrestle. She's not out there using the Flair name as, she has the full package, the total package. She can talk, she can wrestle, she can perform, she can do it all. I think, and she's big. She's not that small Sasha
No,
Banks.
I think she's like 5'10", 5'11".
He's tall too, and she got kind of started late a little bit too because I don't think she had any desire to go into wrestling until I think God forbid after she lost her brother. I think that's
Right.
when she said, "I'm going to go."
That's exactly because see, Reed was training to wrestle,
Yep.
and then when he passed away, then she had that epiphany and that dream of like it was her torch to carry on from then. And if you'll notice, a lot of times she's looking up, and
Yeah.
she's talking to him. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite late because I don't think that she planned on. And the same thing like with Tessa. Tessa kind
Yep.
of came in late to the game, but then my daughter was like at 14 in the ring, so she's always been in there. So it's really kind of cool. All three of them have
Now,
their own destiny.
where's your daughter wrestling now? Is she wrestling now?
She does like independence right now. What was really cool was like for 2 years she was going to college full time.
Right.
She worked for Sonic full time, and then she wrestled every weekend. And then she actually bought a Sonic and owned a Sonic for 2.5 years, I believe, and then wrestled on the weekend. But now she's gotten more into where she's wanting to train and wrestle. And she quit with Sonic, but mostly up and down like the East Coast. But now with the pandemic, no one's wrestled for like the past 6 months. So we're all just waiting to see what happens after that.
Yeah, it's tough right now, the pandemic. I don't know. Now you're down south, North Carolina, I do believe.
Yes, I'm in North Carolina. I live in a small town between Hickory and Lenore, about an hour and a half northwest of Charlotte.
Right. And how the numbers down there with the virus and everything? Are they rising again down there?
We're good. I mean, we never really, like in the county where I'm at, I think we've only had 2 deaths out of the whole thing. So it really hasn't affected us at all.
That's good. That's good. I mean,
crap closed down, and we're all kind of wondering why. But
we're it's funny because I'm up in Boston, so we've been shut down since exactly St. Patty's Day was the first day everybody got locked down, so the barrooms closed and all that, restaurants closed, and they're slowly reopening now. And if we didn't do that, we'd probably be in the situation that Florida and Texas and California are in right now. And I think a lot of that, we're supposed to have SummerSlam next month, but the mayor of Boston put the kibosh on that because no large venues, and this includes all sports, until at least phase 4, which is when they develop a vaccine. And he also put the kibosh on nothing until Labor Day. So we have no July 4th celebration, no feasts and all that stuff that Boston does a lot. So we're missing out. It's just like the summer of nothing basically up here.
Right.
So it's it is depressing in a way. And I was looking forward to SummerSlam, but now it's obviously that's not to be. But not to get sidetracked. Did you really, I got to ask you, with Jim Cornette, did you really dislocate his jaw with that slap? He says I see shoot interviews here and there, and he says, you tell me.
I actually hit him a couple of times because if you look at his promos that he did against me, I probably had a lot of built up animosity to him. I remember in Raleigh, it was hard for me to make it down through the crowd and be at the spot where I was supposed to be at whenever he came around the corner. So I was late. So instead of waiting for him to turn around, I actually hit him in the back of the head. And I remember I hit him really hard on that one. And then there was a spot, I want to say it was in St. Louis, but I can't remember where it was exactly. But I slapped him like really hard. But like what we said before, like the fans were so close, my stuff was going to look good. I mean, I wasn't going to hold back or and yeah, he said he couldn't chew right for like a couple of weeks, so I probably did. But it looked really, really good. So, I mean, and if you're still talking about it almost 40 years later,
that's it. That's awesome. There you go. You did your
I
job.
would much
That's
rather
it.
I would much rather have someone say your stuff looked really good than, oh, it was bad. So
Uh, did you ever have any bad stuff? Like, did you guys ever mess up at all? And that you can recall? I don't recall anything.
I don't
could
think I was trying to think back. I don't think I've missed a spot, and like on a lot of the shows that I've had to do a lot of stuff and be in the right place at the right time. Now, like coming through the crowd or something, I might not have made it to the spot at the right time, but we always got around to it. But I don't really remember messing up.
Yeah. Did you ever get injured at all? Did you ever have an injury?
Cornette chipped my 3 front teeth.
I was going to ask that question, but I wasn't sure.
in Memphis, it was July 3rd. Actually, July 3rd, so that would have been 86 of what, 34 years ago or 36 years. He actually, I was chasing after him, and he turned around and he hit me like right in my mouth and chipped like my 2 front teeth and my bottom tooth. So I had to fly back to Charlotte and have the dentist come off the lake, fix my teeth, and then be ready for Charlotte on the 6th.
Wow, I'd see. So that's the worst of your injuries, and no broken ribs, no separated shoulders or anything like that.
I was because I never really worked, so I mean the worst I had was like shin splints, or like my shins were bruised up from having to jump up in the ring because we very rarely had stairs. So when you think of like jumping up in a ring, it was chest high a lot of times, and getting up there was a chore most of the time, but I did it. I was able to get up there every time.
So what was it like being kissed by Magnum TA on TV?
Very awkward because Sam and I had just started seeing each other, and Sam was like right behind the barricade, the partition, watching, and it was intense. He did stick his tongue down my throat, but it looked good.
If memory serves it right, I think I was watching the video the other day that Jim Crockett was saying, she likes it. That's what he kept saying. And you can see your body go limp, and I'm like, she's selling that pretty damn good. That was good.
Well, that was a build up to Starrcade, and in a lot of people's minds, that's like the best. The angle build up, the whole thing, the animosity between the two guys, everything worked. Everything was perfect. Build up to the I Quit match. Both of the guys really didn't like each other, and they were worked very snug, very stiff.
You can tell in the ring. You can see that.
Yeah, it just
did they really
beat the crap out of each other?
Did they not get along outside the ring? They just didn't like each other?
It was kind of, I don't know how to explain it except for that they were both two young men, both like Bull of the Woods, both trying to get that top spot, both trying to be number one, both very competitive, very athletic. Just, they both wanted to be over so much, and they didn't want to back down from either one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I read the stories, and like they did work kind of stiff, but it worked out to their favor because it looked like they both hated each other and they wanted to kill each other, and that's how it played out. So mission accomplished on that end. I mean, especially the I Quit match and everything, that was just phenomenal. I mean, that's on the network, and I watch that now and then. That's big stuff there. That's good stuff. You don't see that anymore. You don't get that. I miss that kind of stuff.
Right?
Unbelievable. So you had a stint.
Well, when you look at it now, though, too, is that if you think that started in like August of '86 and building it up and the angle and the whole thing, it's like they do a month. They do like 4 shows and then the angle's over with, and then they go on to something else. They don't actually take the time to like do the security guard where I came down and handed the roll of quarters to Tully, and then the next week Magnum came out and he was a police officer and handcuffed me to the rope and went in and they just don't do that anymore. They don't take the time to tell the whole story.
It's not, like I said, a lot of the story now is not inside the ring like it used to be. It's outside the ring, and it's a quick story. That is one thing I definitely miss is you're talking about that. All right, just for example, that angle with the kiss from Magnum was, you said in August. It happened in August or
Right,
July. And that was to build up to Starcade, which, if memory serves me right, Starcade was until Thanksgiving, right?
right, right.
It's a long buildup. That is a huge buildup, and that's, you don't see that anymore.
Mm-mm.
Um, I don't know if it's money or what it is, but I don't know if it's fans retention. The fans nowadays want it now, 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 now. I want to see that match now, because I remember going to the Gardens as a kid, and Bob Backlund, Jimmy Snuka, they fought 3 times before they got in the cage. So there's a 4-month feud right there. You don't see
Right.
that anymore. It's
Well,
like the next pay-per-view.
right. Well, now WWE's got the big pay-per-view like once a month. And
Yeah.
before it used to be like WrestleMania, the once a year WrestleMania. And then it was like twice a year, then 3 times a year. Now it's 12 times a year. So it's just, you got to
Yep.
constantly be doing it instead of like giving it chance to build up. And like even over a year building up to WrestleMania, they don't have that anymore.
They don't do that anymore. I mean, they did back in the day, but not no more. They definitely don't do that. What was it like with pay-per-views for Jim Crockett and being held like on Thanksgiving? That was so weird to me growing up, knowing that there was a wrestling event happening on a major holiday.
That was always like a big, even for us in Texas, like Christmas Day and Thanksgiving, because you think that by the time evening comes around, you probably had enough of the family and hey, let's go to the wrestling matches. And those
Yeah.
were 2 of our biggest nights, or the
Sure.
2 weeks, that especially like Thanksgiving was a big show in Amarillo. That
Yep.
was a big deal to be able to go to that one. And then for Dallas, it was a big one whenever my dad got to work with World Class.
Yep.
And then Christmas Day was always a big, huge wrestling week for my dad too.
Yeah.
But you think that all the families in, hey, let's take everybody and let's go to the wrestle matches.
That's unbelievable.
That was big time. Yeah.
I
Well,
remember.
you had dinner, you've opened up the presents, time to go do something.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm sick of the family. Let's get out of here. So that's awesome. Now I like to ask these kind of questions. They're good questions. Don't get scared. If the baby doll in her prime were still wrestling today, who would you want to get in the ring with?
Oh, Lord. Well, see, I didn't really wrestle, so I can't really,
Okay.
I don't.
Who would you like to be a valet for? Let's put it that way. Since that was the thing.
Let me see.
Who do you think
Who's like the biggest heel? Probably somewhere like with AEW.
Anybody.
Just do something with and especially do something against Cody, like come back and have the envelope and blackmail Cody, like, hey, I've been holding on to this for 30 years. You don't think that I still can't embarrass your family? I can still embarrass your family.
That's a hell of a. You should tell him that. You should get that. Why not? That'd be a great.
I still have the envelope too.
Really? What's the envelope say? What did it say?
It had the office girls and Crockett had. Well, what was really weird was whenever we first started doing the angle, they just gave me an empty envelope to carry, and I was just like, if a fan gets this, they're going to blow everything because I've got to have something in there. So they put a bunch of stuff in there for me and then wrote confidential on it. And I still have the envelope. It's in my china cabinet.
Wow. You still keep it. That's like a historical thing.
Mm-hmm.
You should put that frame. You should frame it up and take it with you on your conventions and have people check that out. That's like a.
I wouldn't want to lose it though. So that would just be it. I'm kind of scatterbrained. I'd forget it somewhere.
Now, obviously, you said Rockin' Robin went on. You both had that tryout you didn't know about. She went on to wrestle for the WWF. What did you went to? You hit the indie circuit for a while, right? After that,
I did a little bit. I worked with like Global. I worked with Mid-South. It kind of seemed like wherever Sam went, I went and did a couple of shots. And then the most success I think I did was I started making gear for the guys. Because I was very familiar like with what they were going to wear, with what kind of strain it was going to have on them, and that they would have to wear it more than once. And I had probably 200 guys I was sewing for at one time. Wow. And then I worked. What was really cool was I was working for Piedmont Airlines, and WWF was having their TV every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I would go get orders and then go back home to Charlotte and sew for like 2 weeks and then fly back out wherever their TV was and then
Wow.
spend 2 days and drop everything off and then go back because I made tights for like Jake and I did Dusty Rhodes, his polka dots. I did all of his polka dots and did Sapphire's WrestleMania outfit. And yeah, there was
Wow.
like 200 guys I was sewing for.
That's awesome. Yeah, I met Jake the Snake a couple of times. He's a great guy when I met him. He was really cool to work with. He reminded me of my brother Johnny, the look and everything and the voice. And I was like,
Right.
oh, and I tell him that, so it's funny. Wow. So what do you keep in touch with anybody in the business anymore? Do you touch base with anybody? Does anybody reach out and say hi or things
At
like
FanFest, yeah, I did like 7 major shows last year, so I got to see like everybody last year.
that?
And I
Right.
think through like the FanFest and the Legends conventions, we kind of see everybody and catch up
Yeah.
with everybody. It was really cool. I got to meet Medusa last year,
Yeah.
so
Yep. I just saw.
that was really awesome. She's like so cool. And then I got to see Missy a couple of times. I got to see Dark Journey and
Oh wow.
got to see like all the girls last year and then get to see Tully every once in a while and see Flair and it's really neat.
Right. Now, another question I would have for today's, obviously there's not many valets around anymore, but if you had the chance to sit down one-on-one with, say, like a Charlotte or Alexa Bliss or anything, what kind of advice would you give them? I don't know if
I
Charlotte
would
needs any
I
advice, but
couldn't give up because everything's changed so much. Whatever I did is not going to they need to listen to whoever WWE is. The most thing that I would say is just sell everything with your face. Everybody is looking at your face.
yeah,
And that's kind of what kind of sold me, because everything went through that. But shoot, they've got their own deal. They're not going to want to listen to an old lady.
that's another thing I meant to ask you because I told you about the Wrestle magazines and Bill after. Like, how did you like those? Did you like those magazines back then? Do you think it helped the business?
Oh yeah, I mean it for all of us because that like what you said, it was like twice a month on Tuesday.
Yeah,
I knew in my heart I kind of was over whenever I went home to Lubbock and my
yeah,
mom who really hated the business after she got out of it. She never really talked about it. She didn't have any stories or every once in a while I'd find like an old picture or
right.
like whatever outfits. But whenever I went home to Lubbock one time, um, the wall in the den had a bunch of my pictures on it where she'd gone
Oh,
to L&H Drug and had cut out the pictures and had taped them on the wall. I was like, I'm over with my mom. So I knew that was really cool.
I remember, obviously to me, I collected them all and everything. And the only thing I didn't like was the time difference with them because, like, I'd find out about Starcade and who won like 2 months later, I
Right, right.
January and stuff. But at least I was educated enough to know what was going on or what was happening and stuff. And you were always on there. I think you had a hot seat interview with Jim Cornette or something
Right,
like
right.
that. It's kind of neat. But talking with Bill after now, and he tells me all the stories behind the scenes. It was like, wow, that was a time. That was a
Yeah.
time back then.
Bill Apter and George Napolitano were like the two main ones.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'll talk to Bill, and I'll be like, I'm gonna use this photo, and he's like, "Yep, I took that one." Or I'm
Right,
gonna use this. Yep, I took that one.
right.
Did he take some photos of you at all?
Oh yeah, he was really good. And then there was a photographer, Eddie Cheslock, that lived
Yep,
in Richmond that
yep,
took a lot of pictures. And thank goodness, like Eddie and I got along really, really well together. And he took a lot of pictures. So
yeah,
thank goodness for Eddie because he captured everything.
right, right. Now, just going back, when you were going to and from the ring, and the crowd would mob you. I mean, what was your reaction when, like, your first time going out there? Like, oh my God, these people are like all over me. Because you said you got a lot of heat back then. So, my mind wonders, like, if that happened nowadays, forget it. But were you scared at all? Were you nervous?
Oh, I never was afraid.
Yeah.
I wore like spikes a lot because then I could
Yeah.
like backhand people.
Okay.
Uh, it was really kind of funny because someone hit me up on Twitter just a couple of days ago, and he apologized. He was sitting on the ringside in Pittsburgh,
Oh
and
God.
he grabbed my butt, and he
Ah,
felt really bad about it. And he says, "I never saw you after that," but he says, "I found your Twitter," and he says, "I just thought I'd let you know that I'm very, very sorry." I thought that was the coolest thing. I thought how that you've had this over your head
Yeah.
like
Oh
40 years.
goodness.
Like, I have to apologize. I have to. But I thought that was really cool. But um,
Oh my God. How many years
yeah,
was that?
that would have been like in '86.
Oh my
You know?
goodness. Oh,
Yeah.
was that the worst that ever happened to you though?
The worst, I think that, and the time that I thought I was really going to get in trouble was
Yeah.
we were in Fayetteville, and it was the 30 days that I was with Dusty. And at the end of the match, Dusty would get the bull rope and put it around my neck because he was going to pull me back to the dressing room because I didn't want to
Right.
be with him. And we were fighting, and I don't want to be with you. Don't be put me
Yeah.
back in that pickup truck. And oh, you're nasty. And so he put the bull rope around my neck and then dragged me back. So he's pulling on me. Well, someone had grabbed me by the hair and was like pulling like this, like full force, like two handfuls of hair.
Oh,
Dusty's pulling me, and I go to like swing
yeah.
and hit whoever's. Well, I can see out of my corner of my eye whoever's got me by the hair is standing on a chair.
Right.
So I'm like full force, and I out of the corner of my eye I see it's a woman and she's pregnant, and I'm like right headed for her stomach. Like it was like the cartoon, like Sylvester and Tweety, where your fist goes "Ah!" to stop, and I just barely tapped her. I thought, oh, I'm gonna get sued. Oh my gosh, someone's gonna get me. But I just barely tapped her. It wasn't that bad, and I was able to get out. And Dusty, we went back to the back, but I thought that was the worst one. That a pregnant woman who was like visibly pregnant, like really like up there pregnant.
Wow. Can barely hear you. Wow. I think your sound went off there.
I'm sorry. I
There
don't.
you are.
Hear you. Okay.
There you go. So she was pregnant standing on the chair?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And visibly pregnant, not just a little pregnant, like
Yeah.
probably 8, 9 months pregnant. Like, yes.
She's probably trying to break her water. That's probably why she wanted to do that.
Why are you standing on a chair and that pregnant in the first place? But oh
And
well.
grabbed my hair. That's
She
funny.
did not like me.
It's funny how you said you get that guy who grabbed your butt who apologized many years later. I had Don Morocco on a couple of weeks ago, and I had to apologize to him because one of my first matches in '81 was watching him, Bob Backlund, inside a steel cage at Boston Garden. And as he left the arena, coming out of the cage into the runway, I ran over. I was a skinny little runt back then, and I swiped his forehead with my hand to get his blood on my hands.
Right. Oh my
And
God.
he looked at me. The security guards looked at me. By the time they figured out what was going on, I was already gone. I didn't wash my hand for 2 days because I went back to school on that Monday with John Morocco's blood on my hands.
Oh wow.
I told him that story, and he was like, he vaguely remembers it. He goes, yeah, you owe me an apology. And I was laughing. I'm like, I'm so sorry. But I was just a little kid, but that's how I was. I was such a big fan, so I could see the overzealous ones, but I never really, would attack somebody.
And I hated being put in the cage. Like Dusty put me in Betty Lou a couple of times.
Oh,
and
wow.
I felt really vulnerable in there because I couldn't see like where the fans were at, and they could hit me through the cage. And then when they pulled me up to the top of Greensboro Coliseum, I mean, I was up there like really high. Someone had a slingshot and was shooting stuff at the back of my legs. And I was afraid that they'd hit me in the face, but like the back of my legs and my butt, I had bruises all over from getting hit with a slingshot.
Oh my goodness.
And with the dark, you can't see where it's coming from. So I kind of could tell where they were at. So I kept my back to them. But they picked me a couple of times really, really good. And it hurt. It really was.
I can't believe no one pointed them out and was like, stop doing that. That's crazy.
They hated me. They didn't care.
Yeah,
they probably egged them on. Hey, let me have a chance. Let me have a chance.
Growing up, my parents would say, "Yep, wrestling's in town. So the streets of Boston are safe that night because they're all inside the garden." So I found out why later on. So that's awesome. Well, we're out of time, so I want to thank you for coming on the What a Day podcast. And just one last question. If and when this pandemic does lift, will you be going back out doing the conventions again or anything?
Yeah, if I can get my husband to take care of the chickens and stuff, but he usually goes with me. But
There you go.
Of course, I love the fans. I love the best part for me is when that fan walks up and all of a sudden they see me and it's 1986 again, and they're sitting on the couch with a grandparent, and you can just see it come over them, all those memories, all that time. And it's Saturday afternoon and they're yelling and screaming at the TV, and they tell me about, like their mom or their dad or their grandma or grandpa that they watched wrestling with, and they're no longer there, and just the memories. And
that's awesome.
It's really cool. It's just really cool for me to see that.
That's why they're called Fan Fest. It takes you right back there. And, I don't miss any of them when they come around up here, but hopefully you can get up here and we can meet face to face. That'd be great.
Hope so. Get a picture taken.
There you go. Awesome. All right. Again, I want to thank you, Baby Doll, for being here on the What a Day podcast. Do you have a website or anything? Or are you just on Twitter? Are you on social media?
I do. I've got a Facebook. I've got a Twitter. I'm pretty political on that. So if you're not a Trump fan, you probably won't like my Twitter or my Facebook. But
I'm a MAGA man.
I do a lot of cool stuff on there. And then there's a lot of memories and a lot of Facebook, like a lot of people post like YouTube videos, and I'll share those again, a lot of pictures. So it's a lot of pet rescues, a lot of my farm, a lot of wrestling, and a lot of Trump. So, and then hit me up, because what I'm doing now is that if you want an 8x10, I would like for you to donate. It's Clifford's Animal Rescue, which is right down the road from me. If you'll do a donation to them, then I'll send you an autographed 8x10. Just hit me up either on Facebook or Twitter, and we can get that arranged.
Awesome. Can you write, "Hey Joe, what a day" on mine?
Yes, I can.
All right.
Send me your address through Twitter, and I'll send you an 8x10.
Awesome. I appreciate it. All right, folks, that is Baby Doll, Nickla Roberts here on the What a Day podcast. And don't forget, folks, you can find What a Day on all social media platforms at Joe Lowry's What a Day. That's 2 T's for twice the fun. And you asked for it, folks. I finally launched the new What a Day website this week at whatadayjoe.com. There you can find all my latest podcasts, episodes, and much, much more, including this one here with the lovely Baby Doll. And that's whatadayjoe.com. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for joining us here on the What a Day podcast. I'm Joe Lowry. What a day.
This has been a What a Day production. Filmed on location at What a Day Studios. The views expressed by Joe Lowry are his and his alone, and that's how it is, so just deal with it. This has been a What a Day production.